Greetings all. So I recently just finished the Silmarillion for the very first time, so I wanted to share some of my thoughts about it. But before that, I just kind of want to talk a little bit about myself, since this is kind of my first real YouTube video for this channel. So much of my adolescence and young adulthood, I didn't show much concern for books unless otherwise required of me for schoolwork, or on the occasion that I showed interest in certain subjects like philosophy or astronomy, or on even more rare occasions, for whatever reason, I would want to attempt to read some sort of classic novel like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which is one of my favorite books. Good. In middle school, I reluctantly gnawed my way through The Hobbit. I just didn't find it interesting, and most of it I forgot, yet somehow I retained just enough memory of it to still find the film adaptations largely unenjoyable, especially when compared to the Lord of the Rings films. For many years, much of what I knew and loved about Tolkien's world was based on Peter Jackson's acclaimed trilogy. In the twilight years of my teenage years, I made my first attempt to read the trilogy, but immediately I was humbled and realized that although the films very much resembled the books, they were a far cry from what's actually in the books. So once I embarked on trying to read The Fellowship of the Ring, ultimately, I don't think I even made it out of the Shire. So, long story short, after that initial experience, I pretty much gave up all hope that I would ever actually finish reading the books. But many years later, now in my 30s, during which time I reconnected with my Catholic faith, I learned that J.R.R. Tolkien was actually a devout Catholic. And not only was he a devout Catholic, when writing and creating the world of Middle-earth, he drew largely on his experience as a faithful Catholic, and into his works he poured his love for God and the complex richness of life. Finally, after having a much deeper interest and thirst for his writings, I learned of the elusive work, the Silmarillion, which portrays the splendorous creation story of Middle-earth, of Ea, the universe, Arda, the actual world that we all know and love as Middle-earth. And in learning about the Silmarillion and immersing myself in its text, very quickly you learn that Arda's history is a tragic and violent history, and is at times very reminiscent of biblical text. So, long removed from my childhood experience with The Hobbit, which failed to capture my imagination, I blame mostly my disdain for school and reading in general at that age. I am disposed to regard the Silmarillion as my principal foray into the world of Tolkien, which of course goes against many reading order suggestions. But after completing the Silmarillion, I can't think of a better way to approach his works other than reading his works chronologically. So, my most to-the-point thoughts on the Silmarillion is that it's fantastic, and it's absolutely a must-read. Out of the lovingly expanded canon of Middle-earth put together by Christopher Tolkien, the Silmarillion, outside of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, is by far the most complete and cohesive work available. Children of Húrin is appreciated as a cohesive novel, but even at that, it is still regarded as being somewhat fragmented, as is the case with Beren and Luthien and the other great tale, The Fall of Gondolin, all of which have shorter but more complete versions available in the Silmarillion. And to distinguish the work of Children of Húrin, it is, out of those three great tales, it is definitely the most complete and most narrative-like. Starting broadly and seemingly disparate from the events of the Third Age, the lore of Beleriand gradually narrows into a finely sculpted depiction of the world as it was, which then serves as the backdrop for the War of the Ring. Overall, the experience of the Silmarillion comes in waves. There are sections that are much more entertaining, whereas there are sections that aren't very entertaining, but they offer painstakingly detailed descriptions of the world of Beleriand. I believe it's, let's see. Yes. Chapter 14 of Beleriand and its realms. Wonderfully crafted. So much detail. Absolutely my least favorite part of the book. If that's your thing, you're into that, more power to you. For me, again, I can appreciate it. It's just not that entertaining. And when I was going through it, I came across that chapter having no idea how it was going to read, what it was going to be like. And upon starting it, I immediately told myself, if I don't finish this chapter right now, I am never going to finish this book. So that one in particular, I really had to power through it. And I'm glad I did, because I finished the book. So outside of that, probably my favorite part of the book is its opening, where we are introduced to the god of Ea, Eru, the One, Ilúvatar. And right away, it's just, it's really breathtaking. Using some allusion to the Genesis story of the Christian Bible, Tolkien depicts the creation of existence of the world as a chorus that was brought upon by Ilúvatar. Essentially, from his thought, he produces this music, and within that music consists of these 14 lesser gods, 14 or 15, I forget, because that number gets kind of thrown off with Melkor, which this creation story, again, much like the Christian Bible, introduces evil through the fall of a Holy One, which of course is Melkor. So considering that, again, not to harp on the work being Christian, but you can't deny that it is heavily rooted in the bosom of Christianity. So I just wanted to share a quick section from the Ainulindale. Now Ilúvatar sat and hearkened, and for a great while it seemed good to him, for in the music there were no flaws. But as the theme progressed, it came into the heart of Melkor to interweave matters of his own imagining that were not in accord with the theme of Ilúvatar, for he sought therein to increase the power and the glory of the part assigned to himself. To Melkor, among the Ainur, had been given the greatest gifts of power and knowledge, and he had a share in all the gifts of his brethren. He had gone often alone into the void places seeking the imperishable flame, for desire grew hot within him to bring into being things of his own, and it seemed to him that Ilúvatar took no thought for the void, and he was impatient of its emptiness. Yet he found not the fire, for it is with Ilúvatar. Being alone, he had begun to conceive thoughts of his own, unlike those of his brethren. So yeah, it's just cool. Like, I guess as a Christian, it's cool knowing that it is inspired and shares themes of Christianity. But at the same time, it's just cool fantasy. And a testament to that is that everybody loves Lord of the Rings. Not everybody, but people who just appreciate a good story. It just stands that it's just awesome. So once the creation story settles, the lesser gods, the Valar, go to inhabit the earth, and not just inhabit it, but sculpt it and make it ready for the coming of the children of Ilúvatar, the first and second born, the elves and men. But as these lesser gods who are aligned with Ilúvatar are seeking to create the world in his image and by his design to make it beautiful and inhabitable for the children of Ilúvatar, of course seeks to destroy it. He seeks to undo everything that they make. And for quite some time, they don't really realize what he's up to because he's just isolated himself from them and, so to speak, cut himself off from the Force. They can't really sense him and sense his intentions. So as that goes on, then eventually the elves come into the picture, and much of what is built in the Silmarillion in the First Age depicts how these different elf societies are formed and how kind of the political landscape is between all these different factions of elves. And from that, of course, comes Feanor, who is the maker of the Silmarils. So as the Silmarillion goes on, the interesting thing is that it slows down a bit in the middle. And the odd thing about it slowing down is that it speeds up. The narrative speeds up so quickly that Tolkien's essentially just running through generations from page to page and sometimes even from paragraph to paragraph. And not only moving from generation to generation, but jumping all across Beleriand, where exploring the different going-ons of the different elf factions, and then the men are introduced, and again you have yet more factions that are going on. But as I was getting used to the pace of the book, a little after halfway, it slows down, and finally, as the reader, you're able to catch your breath. And the great tales of Turin Turambar, of Beren and Luthien, and the Fall of Gondolin, those ones get most of the attention. But the first significant story that really caught my attention and kind of impacted me was of Magellan. That one there, it's a tragic story, not in that there's any sort of innocent death, although you could, I guess, Ainulindale would be the innocent agent in the story. So once you reach that story, the Silmarillion really starts to pick up, especially once you get to of Turin Turambar. From that point forward, you really start to see the overall story of what's happening in the Silmarillion, which essentially follows the story of the Silmarils moving throughout time from various actors that ultimately lead to the destruction of Beleriand and the demise of Melkor in the end of the First Age. So at the tail end of the Silmarillion, we are treated to a very brief summary of the fall of Numenor in the Second Age. Then after that, we're treated to yet an even more brief summary of the events of the Third Age and the battle for Middle-earth. So in truth, the Silmarillion doesn't just tell the story of the First Age, it actually tells the entire story of Middle-earth. Of course, the Second and Third Age very briefly, but overall you still get the idea of the overall theme of, good versus evil. The tale as old as time. So to summarize all that, read it. I love it. I love this book. It's very captivating. And as you're going through it, it just sucks you in more and more. And as you get towards the end, I got sad. I was like, oh, this is actually coming to an end. But of course, it's just the beginning. So one of the things that I love about it is that, again, I only know what I know about the Lord of the Rings from the movies, but understanding that the core and essence of the story is still intact. What the Silmarillion offers is a very stark contrast of tragedy in comparison to the optimism and the victory of the good guys in the Lord of the Rings. In the Silmarillion, the good guys lose, and they lose hard. So it's just interesting to see how the very ancient history of this universe sets the stage for the main story. So yeah, now that I've completed it, I absolutely cannot wait to finish The Hobbit. I'm currently in the middle of The Hobbit, and then lastly move on to The Lord of the Rings. And once I finish The Lord of the Rings, I hope to make my way through the histories of Middle-earth and really get to appreciate the work that Christopher Tolkien did. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. Hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to making many more videos. Thanks.